and just put the recording on because I need to use this. But can people share, like in your experience, like if you've done a few bow ties, what are the common issues you see? Or if you've been in and around them, what are you seeing as the issues? Getting the right people in the room. That's a massive one, John. We could riff on that a lot, actually. And I have been party to that, where we've completely missed the mark in getting the wrong or missing key skills and experience in the room. That's a good one. What else? What do other people see? Are issues with bow ties, either in their business or... So Megan, lack of understanding the process to get a quality outcome. Yeah. So that could also be by the participants or could also be by the facilitator itself. Misunderstandings regarding the process from Ashley. Absolutely. I have seen some facilitators not understand how to facilitate a bow tie, and it's a pretty uncomfortable process. Anyone else have a perspective on this? You know, something that you've seen breaks when bow ties are being run, or something your business struggles with? Thank you for sharing those who shared. Anyone else have anything to throw in the mix? Tom or Elzbieta? I'll keep an eye on the chat, give you guys time to think. All right, so there are definitely some issues. We see lots, you've probably understood some, and let's now talk about, well, what can we do to offset this? John, someone dominating the conversation. Yes. So I smile because I can think of about 10 different people that I've had in my world. Yes, line up with that one. All right, so the first thing here is around know your destination. So being absolutely clear and spending the time to be clear on the unwanted event. So we want to end up in the right spot, don't we? If we don't take work at the start, then we could end up in the wrong spot. So I'll give the analogy. So imagine if you lived in LA and you wanted to fly to Austria or Vienna. Let's say Vienna, the capital of Austria. How the booking people got it wrong, and you ended up in Australia. Just a small little reword or terminology change. How would you feel about that, though, if you've ended up in a completely different continent, gone the wrong side of the world? It was only a simple mistake, yet it had a profound impact on the outcome. And so the same thing can happen with bow ties in the center of the knot or the unwanted event. If we get the wording wrong, we can end up in a situation or a destination where our causes may be deficient. Our consequences could be deficient. We've got the wrong controls, wrong control failure mechanisms, wrong critical controls, just completely different world. So we want to get it right. And oftentimes when we see that, or businesses struggle with this, here's some signs and symptoms of that. And certainly if any of these sounds familiar to your business, then throw it in the chat. But we're just unclear on what the center, the thing in the center of the knot is. Or sometimes someone challenges it and people are like, well, I'm not sure. And then we end up going round and round. We've ended up with critical controls which aren't even related to the risk. Or when we actually just letting someone in, or we have incident investigations. When we do the incident investigations, we go back in time and look at the bow tie and go, hang on, we got this completely wrong. So some of those may be familiar to your organization or what you've seen or in your experience. And wouldn't it be nice if we had absolutely clarity on the unwanted event and our bow tie descriptions or what we're bow tying had complete alignment to our broad brush risk assessment line items. This webinar is not about broad brush risk assessments. We've got different ones around that. So what do we need to do? So first of all, we need to understand that the unwanted event, so we're talking about this thing here in red, the description of the unwanted event should describe the point at which the system has gone from in control to out of control. So you'll note that I'm not talking about energy source here because bow ties can be applied to systems, can't they? It could be a financial system, it could be a production system. It doesn't necessarily have to be a H2C flavor. And so there's a nice little graphic here that helps us frame this up better and might solidify the understanding, and certainly can help you potentially, if you're involved in bow tie facilitation, describe this and articulate this to other people. So we can see here, underneath the blue zone, we go to acceptable normal operating zone, and we might be shuffling in around this. But sometimes we can end up into the unacceptable but recoverable operating zone. So this is where we might have high potential hazards or things like that. So hazards or near misses here, but we can still come back into safety. We can still recover from that. However, there'll also be, when we're in this zone, we can go to this point where the system gets out of control, or we can no longer recover, and it's all about mitigation. And what we're looking to do is we want to describe this point here. Okay, the time at which we go from in control to out of control. That's what needs to be in the center of the knot. So, question. So let's think about working at heights, and this is one now I invite people to put something in the chat. If we're thinking about the activity is working at heights, and sorry, let me just go backwards, and we're trying to describe the process, the time at which we've gone from in control to out of control, what could be an example statement that we would put in the center of the bow tie? Working at heights, what could be some wording we use that describes when that system's gone out of control? Anyone have any ideas? Elzbieta, fall from height. Mitchell, the moment the ladder starts to fall. Yep. John, person slips and falls. Yeah, I think we're all on the same page, isn't it? Once the person starts falling, it's only about mitigation, isn't it? That we've lost control. At the point that someone starts falling, we've lost control. What about vehicle interactions? Because that's one that people always talk about, and we always talk a lot in and around this, and people have different terminologies. If we're thinking about vehicle interactions, what could be some terminology we use in the center of the bow tie? How can we describe that at the point of whiskage? I won't give the right framing because vehicle impact. Potentially, although you could actually say, Megan, that vehicle impact is a consequence. So what could be a description further earlier in the timeline prior to us having the vehicle impact? This is what we want to hone into to be able to glean out. You don't have any ideas? So thinking about vehicle interactions, we've got heavy vehicles. We've got Elzbieta, loss of control of vehicle. Megan, loss of control of vehicle. Excellent. So I'll assume you guys didn't read what I had in there earlier, but that's, isn't it? The point at which we've lost control, that's what we want to have in the middle, because once we've lost control, we could have lots of different outcomes, couldn't we? So you remember earlier when I was going through this, I had an example of this simplified one, and I've changed some wording here. So instead of this being loss of control of vehicle, I have now changed the wording to break our rule set to be LV vehicle collision. Yep. And I have seen bow ties with this. So LV vehicle collision. So straight away, what we can see here, and I've ring-fenced this off, here would be some example consequences that might be realized if the middle said loss of control of vehicle. But with this reword here, we would not pick up as part of our bow tie. If we said LV vehicle collision, then the idea of pedestrians doesn't even appear, does it? But we know if we lose control of a vehicle, one of the potential impacts could be on pedestrians. Same as contact with infrastructure or over open edge or into a body of water or a thing like that. That's that's an example of, if we don't get this right, it has a tangible impact here, and potentially on causes as well. So hopefully everyone follows that, and we got the gist of it. Can't spend too long on this. So in the slide pack, I'm not going to go through it, but we've got a table here of some examples of what's a good example versus what's a poor example. And one of the things you can ask yourself when you read the center of the knot is, if it's describing a consequence or an impact, then it means it's not, it could be reworded to be more helpful. So before Christmas, we were working with a client who asked us to review pretty much their whole critical risk management process, their documentation as part of our advisory service. And so this organization had 30 bow ties, which kind of lined up with their critical risk profile. And can anyone guess what we found when we reviewed their unwanted unwanted event descriptions. Anyone have a guess? What do you think we found? So they had 30 bow ties. I said, look, can you just look all of this? From Mitchell, yep, describing consequences. Yep, there was certainly some were of that. Yep. Can anyone else think of some other things that we saw or observed during that? Repetition. A little bit, but not so much, Amar. But yeah, there were some things that were copied and pasted. But I'm thinking about the center of the knot. So describing consequences. Anyone else think of some stuff we found when we were just looking at the center of the knot? I'll keep an eye on the chat. So basically, 14 out of the 30 had issues with the wording of their unwanted event. So some were describing consequences. Yeah, some described a hazard. So pretty much they didn't nail the loss of control. So think about that, almost half were worded incorrectly, and this is for critical risks. So now obviously they're undertaking a project to go and fix that, and it's a sizable piece of work because the center of the knot is the start of the bow tie process. So what do you need to do? Probably depending on your role in the organization, but certainly this is what we advise people that have some issues is go and review what you've currently got and just ask that question. Does the center of the knot describe the loss of control of the system? If it does, happy days. If it doesn't, then there's some work to be done because we know that this is around the high ticket stuff. Okay, so we talked about the impacts of not getting the center of the bow tie right, the process that the clarification you can use to describe the center of the knot, and a client who almost 50% of their bow ties were incorrectly defined. So what type of impact would it make to your critical risk management process and the bow ties in your organization if you had these absolutely worded correctly? So now you know there's a process of attaining clarity by aligning it to the right definition. I guess there's two options. One, you can just carry on as is and let what's happened in the past happen in the past. Or two, really challenge yourself, challenge the organization to go, hang on, we don't think we got this right. We need to do something about it. Because we know the flow and impact to consequences, critical controls, critical control monitoring, it all can flow from there. So closing that out, defining an unwanted event as a loss of control event is a key strategy in mastering bow tie analysis. All right, so the second one, wrong tool for the job. This may have been applicable to you. You might have seen this in the past, but using bow tie at the wrong times. So the analogy here, you can see, using a pump to inflate a truck tire. All right, so imagine that you are a professional cyclist and you're professional in both road cycling and mountain biking. Like you love doing both. And you decide that at your next mountain bike race, you're going to use your road bike. So this one here on the left, so it's got skinny tires. It doesn't have any suspension at all. What do you think the result might be? So probably unlikely you'd win, and you could certainly make it work by using your skills and experience, but you acknowledge that you just didn't have the right equipment suited for that particular scenario or that particular race. So the same thing can happen if we use bow tie for the wrong times. We can use our skills and experience to try and make it work, but ultimately the outcome's going to be deficient compared to using a different tool. So we might have issues with risks and controls and critical controls and the like. And when we see this as examples, this is often what we see within organizations where this is present. And again, feel free to call out if any of these suit or you're familiar with. So sometimes people just don't know when to use it. We have seen some, I'll use the terminology, bastardization of the bow tie process or template to suit a different need. It's been used for process steps. It's been used to assess complex systems as an example. So let's talk about how we avoid that, because we want to know, we know where do you want to be. You want to have absolute clarity. This is when we use bow tie and this is when we use something else. I think we'd all agree. And so a little bit of content here just to align to this. So bow ties are designed, if you think about it, to analyze one loss of control event, aren't they? Like we just talked about the center of the knot. And so you can see some examples there. You know, there's some HSEC type hazards where bow tie be suited to. So they're not designed to analyze a scope with multiple hazards or a job or something where you're going to have multiple hazards and multiple loss of control things. And you can see here some examples of processor activities that might have multiples. And they're not designed to analyze failure modes of complex systems. For example, gas monitoring, electric protection. Think about other different systems that you might want to understand how they could fail and how you improve that. So let's use an example here of electrical energy. You can see that here in the middle. Down the left-hand side, one of the things that our organization needs to do is we need to do a risk assessment or a risk analysis of our isolation process. You know, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So when we think of an isolation process, there could be many different things that could go wrong, couldn't there? It could be many different risks, many different hazards, etc. So in that scenario, that's where we'd be wanting to use a rack or similar type of tool or a job step analysis. So something that's all around step this, what can go wrong, this is what we've got to do. Similarly, over on the far right-hand side, we might say, well, look, as part of managing our electrical risks on site, we have all of this electrical protection infrastructure. So RCDs, lightning protection, all of these things all together as a system. And we want to look at this system and work out how can it fail and what have we got in place to stop it from failing. So in those scenarios, that's where we'd use things like a hazard operability study or failure modes effects analysis or something else. There's probably a whole host of other tools out there that can do that, which are suited to that. Where bow tie sits in this mix is, okay, one of our critical risks is contact with live electrical conductors. So that's our loss of control. And we want to understand what are the different causes and consequences, preventive controls, mitigating controls, and that's where we use bow tie. So in this framework, we can see here, we can see actually that for one energy source, we may have multiple different types of risk assessment or risk analysis tools, and bow tie has a place. And I have seen bow tie try to be applied here and try to be applied here, and it hasn't worked, unfortunately. So similarly, again, what do you need to do? Just check, just validate, how's bow tie been used within your organization? Has it been for a loss of control or has it tried to be for other things? Similarly, reverse engineering, have we used, where we just want to do one assessment of this, have we actually used a different tool? Some places use rack, it can work, but bow ties appear to be a little bit more effective in being able to granulate that out. And if you find some issues, then obviously there's some work potentially ahead there. So same, again, so we talked about the impacts. If you don't use bow tie at the right time or the right tool, how it can impact on your risk mitigation process, some criteria that helps you understand when to use bow tie or not, and think about what impact could it have on your risk management process within your organization if you had that right, using bow tie at the right times. And if it would have a material impact, then it's up to you what you do about it. Do you drive the organization to make sure you use it at the right times so you have the right outcomes, or just allow it to continue? So obviously the choice is up to you. And rounding that out now, so ensure that bow tie analysis only used for the analysis of single loss of control events is a key strategy in mastering a bow tie analysis. Okay, the third and final one we'll think about now is, are your controls really controls? And I have talked about this on and off a few different times. So let's think about, I was going to use the word soccer, but people just call it football now. So imagine if you were the coach of a football team, let's say the ones here in red, and the only instructions you gave your players, you said, look, you three, you're up the front, you attack, you three in the middle, you just do some stuff between attack and defense, and you four at the back, you defend, and you be the goalkeeper. So with that level of instruction or granularization, how do you think the team would go? Would the players know what their specific roles were or are? And how would they even know if they're doing their role or not? Because if they're up the front, if they're in front, they're one of the three and they're attacking, in their mind, it's like, yep, all good. So the same thing can happen if we think about our controls in our bow ties is, so if they're not specific, measurable, and auditable, how are we being specific in what we want them to do? How do we know what good looks like? How do we know if they're effective or not? And that's part of the opportunity for us. And when we work with organizations where this can manifest, here's some examples of what we see. And I wonder if any of these are familiar with either within your organization at the moment. Certainly one of the ones that we see all the time is there isn't a linkage between the control and whether it's in the safety and health management system or not. It essentially is just words on the page. So within the safety and health management system or the maintenance system, whatever system that ensures that control is in place and working. And where we want to be, you want to have specific controls, and we want to be able to have control effectiveness performed on the key controls or on the critical controls. So this is a question to everyone. What are your thoughts here? So I've talked about that we want to go from broad and granular and a bit wishy-washy down to specific, measurable, and audible. Why do you think that's the case? Or why do you think that's important? I encourage you just to throw something in the chat. Like what comes to mind, either specific to your organization? Like how do you think it could help? John, say they are effective. Yep. What else? What do other people think? Why are we saying we need to spend the time to make these controls specific, measurable, and audible? Effective. What else? Anyone else have any ideas? Effectiveness is a pretty key one. Mitchell, when carried out, showing due diligence. Yep. Elsbieta, so that you can check they are in place. Absolutely. So when you go out in the field, how do you know what you're checking for? What criteria you're using? Yep. Anyone else have anything? Any other ideas? You can feel free to keep jumping some in there. So what we do know, and so I'll put a mining slant on this, what we do know is controls fail. Yep. And controls can be missing. So we need to give ourselves the best chance of success to be granular to stop that from happening. So here's just some extracts I'm not going to read from a fatality report in the Queensland mining industry. I'm sure if you swap out Queensland mining for whatever jurisdiction you're in and industry you're in, these same principles would apply. And unfortunately, in Queensland mining, there was a fatality late yesterday afternoon in the Bowen Basin. Someone was pinned between a light vehicle and another vehicle, which is pretty devastating. Again, we need to get these right. These are the things that can help save lives. So we've got to do the best we can at the design stage to get them right. So a little bit of theory or some concepts here. You might have heard this before or seen this. So controls, which we'll quickly run through, can be an act, object, or a system. And more importantly, they need to be relevant to the risk and specific, measurable, and auditable. So who's heard of those terms before? Act, object, system. Just a quick poll, either yes, no. Y for yes, N for no, or yes. Who's heard of act, object, system? Mitchell, no. John, yes. Megan, yes. Who else? Anyone else? Tom, no. Anyone else? Oh, sorry, I was just trying to scroll the chat. Ma, yes. Elsbieta, yes. Cool. All right, nothing breaks. If you haven't, we'll just quickly run through that anyway. So think about an act is literally that, a human act which of itself arrests or mitigates an unwanted event. I like to think about it, if I could see it with a video camera, if I could record it, or not video cameras, they don't exist anymore, like my daughter tells me, if I could record it on my phone, then it would be an act. So here's a question. Is isolation procedure an act type control for the hazard of incorrect isolation? So have a bit of think about that and then just reply yes or no. So Mitch, you're okay. Mitch says no. What do other people think? So read it, think about the definition. Tom, no. Elsbieta, no. Megan, no. Mark, no. All right, I think we're all on the same page. That's good. Can't trick you guys. So we know if we get granular, isolation procedure is not an act, is it? You can't record that. What we do need to do is we need to look inside that isolation procedure for the specific act, which could be test the system is de-energized prior to commencing work. Yep, so that's an act, isn't it? That's something we could record. That's something we could see, and that's what we would list as a control when we're thinking about acts. So an object, complete other end of the scale, it's a physical, engineered, designed object which in of itself would arrest or mitigate an unwanted event. Okay, whoops, that went forwards. Which of the following are object type controls? So think about objects that have no human involvement, can operate in and of themselves. Which of these do you think could be an object type control? Which of these? John's saying all of them. What do other people think? Mitchell's gone boom gates and alarm sensors. Seatbelts need to be worn. Yes. Because we had it all. Okay. It is a kind of bit of a trick question. Oops, sorry. It's going back and forth here. So the answer, fire sensors and alarm. The other two require acts to enable their success. So I always qualify the second. So we think about it, seatbelts, yep, a human needs to do something. Boom gates, assume that you live out in the country where I do, where they're not the ones that are fully secure. They come down, but you can still drive around them. So if the boom gate comes down, still a human needs to stop, don't they? And stop there. Where the one that doesn't require any human activity is the fire sensors and alarm. So the other two require acts to enable success, but the ones are, sorry, my mouse is going crazy. The third one there, which requires an object and a system is, sorry, an object and an act is a system control. So seatbelts are a system. The boom gates are a system as an example. Okay, so this is one that we don't do well. I'm not going to go granular on this one. And in my experience, I'll put my hand up. In my earlier life as a safety advisor, I wasn't being specific, measurable, and auditable on the controls and the control statements at all. How does your organization go being specific, measurable, and auditable? Just quick round the grounds, good or could be improved. Think about the controls that are listed in risk assessments or bow ties. Would it pass the specific, measurable, auditable test? Megan could be improved. Yeah, who else? No, it needs to be done. Work in progress from Mitch. Yep, John could be improved. We'll see if anyone else has got some stuff to put in there. I think we'll all agree, and I think probably every risk assessment, even the best risk assessment done, we probably all agree you could do some stuff. And there's an interesting aspect here, which I'm not going to dive into. You can get the slides later on, but even asking ourselves, are we listing some things in the control statement that aren't necessarily a control? It could be a support activity or could be a verification activity. And many bow ties I see have this, where we've got support activities and verification activities listed as controls. So this is really starting to get in the weeds now, but this is where we need to end up, isn't it? We've got to get our controls right, but also understand what's not a control and how are those things picked up in the mix. Okay. So think about back to the client I mentioned that we helped before Christmas. So of their 30 bow ties, how many do you think we found had significant issues with their control wording? Not just a few, like, oh, this is a cosmetic thing, but like significant things, like ones that were just broad statements. Out of the 30, what number of bow ties do you think we found? Half, Mitch? That's optimistic. John, 25. Elzbieta, 25. Yeah, it was pretty much all 30. Yeah, it was pretty concerning. And I think from memory, probably about 28 of those were at critical control level. So broad critical controls, the things we say must be in place. There was just no granulation around them whatsoever. So pretty confronting, and no wonder we still has some challenges there. Obviously, we're helping them improve that. All right, so another decision. So we've talked about, it needs to be done. You need to get granular, you need to be specific, measurable, and auditable. We know how it helps. We know what happens if you don't do it. We talked about the criteria of what you need to do, and just give an example of client that pretty much 100% of their bow ties, their controls, they had issues with. And 28 out of 30 was around critical control. So you've got a choice to make. At what point are you going to start to drive that discipline to get granular and specific, or you're just going to let it go as is? So rounding that out, ensuring controls are clearly defined is a key strategy. Got a double up there in mastering bow tie analysis. Okay, let me get rid of the chart there. All right, so not sure why you showed up today. I mean, clearly you got some challenges in bow tie. You even talked about things like people in the room, people understanding the process. How many people facilitate bow ties that have got their head around, those aspects. What we do know is if we have poorly defined unwanted events, we're going to have deficient bow ties. And if we use the criteria of loss of control system, then we're going to have a better chance of getting the bow ties right, even right at the start. We know that bow ties have a time and place, and that time and place is for loss of control event, and only one at a time, not multiple. And we know that controls need to be specific, measurable, auditable, related to the risk, in order for us to determine whether we have effective controls in place or not. So obvious question is, how do I do it? You can do it like how we've been doing it, the slow or fast way. So do what we've been doing for the last 5 years, where you try some stuff, learn some stuff, get some information, apply it, learn, and then it's just a continuous loop. Or you can do it from someone, done it a bunch of times. So I mentioned at the start, what can you do if you need more information, need more help on that? We have our next virtual bow tie masterclass coming up. So look, if you're happy with where you're at with bow ties, if you think your organization's got it nailed, it's not for you. But if you think, hang on, I could improve my skills or experience, or there's people in my organization that can improve the skills and experience and want to go through bow ties end to end and how you do them and tools, then that's who it's suited for. Some quick little details here before we get into Q&A. So pretty much in a 3-hour slot, virtual, online, we go through bow tie end to end. We pull out the template that we use, which is a simple one, but we go through all the aspects, practicing the center of the knot, getting right on causes, making sure we get granular on causes and impacts. How do we apply a flowchart selection process to identify critical controls? How do we identify critical control failure pathways? How do we identify their failure prevention strategies? How to do control effectiveness assessments, all of that sort of stuff. That's what we pump into that 30-minute slot. So you can see there's some words there. Lovely, you can put the link up more in the chat there about when it happens. And then part of that too, you get your templates, you get your workbook, get a year of support. It's pretty popular actually, which is good, because we're all about why are we doing. If we can help upskill you in this, then it's all about saving lives, which aligns with our why. And to give you the confidence too, like we just back up all of our courses with a 100% money back guarantee. Like if you come in, you do it, and you don't think you got the value, well, you've still done the course, you still keep the resources, and we'll give the money back as well, because we're so confident in what we deliver to our clients. So look, if you're interested in that, I encourage you to jump on there. Lovely's got the link. You can go and follow that up. You can send us some questions about that. So our next one is coming up in Feb. There's only 5 slots left. So we don't have lots and lots of people, because we want to make it a pretty intimate affair so we can go deep, relevant to your particular business. So now we've got time. We've got plenty of time, for questions or comments. And certainly if you wanted to suss out the course, then you can suss out the link. So right now, we'll open up the chat function. And if anyone has a burning question or an observation or a comment, then please throw it in the chat, and we can spend some time now really honing in on what's a particular area or something that you want to chat about. And I'll open up the chat on my screen here. Does anyone have a burning question or something you want to validate? Megan's got to go. It's ready to go. Will the recording be sent to our registered emails? Yep, we'll lock that. Okay, thoughts on risk registers versus hazard registers. Same thing or different? That is really interesting. If you got to go, Megan, bye. Thanks for coming along, mate. Thoughts on risk registers versus hazard registers. Same thing or different? That's very interesting, Mitch. Because even we have interesting conversations about a risk register in and of itself, and does it help the organization? If it does, how does it help the organization, and how does it not become this extra thing to manage or create a lot of distress for people? So what I've seen, mate, is I've seen them essentially called the same thing: risk register, hazard register. Most of what I've seen, people just use those terms interchangeably to describe the same thing. I guess if we went granular on it, I guess what's the difference between a hazard and a risk? Well, a hazard just has some likelihood and consequence thrown against it. And so if I play that out, most of the things I've seen are more of a risk register. I don't know if that helps at all, mate. So that's one in terms of, are they different or the same? And the second part in how they help, I'll riff off this anyway, is I haven't seen it provide a lot of value to the organization, certainly for organizations that have a robust critical risk management process. But what I have seen it use is it's good to inform the safety and health management system. So we have a list of basically our risk profile documented, and then we can then use that to go and look at our safety and health management system, say, have we addressed all of these risks in our safety and health management system somewhere? And generally I've seen a mapping activity done there. Not sure if that answers your question, mate. Feel free to ask a follow-up if that helps. Elzbieta, just in terms of vehicle bow ties, how would you word normal braking systems? Since they don't work by themselves, so they can't be an object, but obviously need to be in place for the operator to be able to brake, should it be a control? This is a discussion we always have and never get to the bottom of. That is very interesting. Let me just reread that one again. So just in terms of vehicle bow ties, how would you word normal braking systems? So normal, I'm going to assume that's in the person needs to hit the brakes. Since they don't work by themselves, so they can't be an object, but obviously need to be in place for the operator to be able to brake. Should it be a control? This discussion we always have, need to get to the bottom of. Okay, so one way seeing this addressed is, remember, we think about a system. So a system is a combination of an object and a person doing something. So, what I'm thinking about here is a foot-operated brake that we see on a light vehicle or something like that. So we know from a system perspective, there's some design and construction and maintenance things that we need to have in place for that object component, isn't there? And we can set up, we can understand how could that fail, and what do we got to do to make sure that object side of things aren't failing. So for example, I don't know, it could fill up with dust or get contaminated, or it could be, some mud gets on the brake pedal. So all of those ways could cause a failure object side of it. And then the human act component of it as well, we could then analyze to understand, well, who needs to be shown what, where do we pick it up in the system? How could the human component side of that fail? So again, it could be, well, it's slippery shoes, I don't know, they not license, all of that sort of stuff. So that's how I have seen braking systems, if I think about that standard one, addressed. They've classed it as a system, and then if they have classed it as a critical control, when they get to the performance standard level, there's two parts of the performance standard. One is the object component and one is the act component. And they've got verification set up to look at both of those aspects. Don't know if that answers. Okay, good. Thanks, that helps a lot. Good. I'm glad it does. Anyone else got a question? Tom, do you have a follow-up, or Elsbia, do you have a follow-up? Just trying to see who else is still on the line. Who else is on the line here? Does anyone else have a question? Let me just go back, see if he's still with us. Tom, do you have a question, or John, is there anything, or an observation, or Ashley, or Amar, is there any observations? Elsbia, thanks. Another good session. Going back to bed now. Okay, John, all good. Okay, I will move to the next bit. So look, yep, copies of the slides. Look, we'll send it out actually. So the people that joined us, we'll send that out as a link. I only started recording, I think, 10% of the way in. So I will lovely record this, top and tail it, and we'll get a link to the recording out there sent as well. No, that's good, Tom. Thank you for that feedback. Yeah, hopefully it was helpful. You all know where to find me. LinkedIn, everywhere. I'll talk about this till the cows come home. So that's it from me. I will stay on the line. If anyone wants to talk about this topic or something similar, I'll happily stay on the line, and we can open up the lines and just have some dialogue. For those that need to go, thank you for joining. Yeah, feel free to give any other feedback. We'll send you some copies of the info. So for those who need to go, happy days. Catch you next time. For those that want to stay on the line, feel free to unmute yourself, and we can have a good discussion. Thanks, Mar. Thanks, John. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, mate. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully, we'll see you on the next one. Okay. Who's next? Mitch, how are you, bud?
Just want to say, yeah, thanks, man. You're hitting the nail on the head, and it's just really, really good stuff.
Oh, that's good, man. So what's your what organization are you with?
So me and John, who was on there before, worked for a company, WSP, in New Zealand, and I guess it's we're essentially a environmental and engineering consultancy.
Right. Okay.
And it's interesting, we are like as safety advisors, but we provide a lot of our engineers and designers do all of the planning for major public infrastructure, motorways, through waters, that kind of stuff. And so we're not necessarily the doers of the work, right? So we're one step removed. So we design, and then that gets provided to a third party that will actually deliver the physical works.
Yeah.
But obviously, because we did the design, we have the overarching influence and a lot of liability.
100%.
So we do have a lot of people that are out on physical work sites and in that environment, although we're not the ones actually doing the construction of what was designed. Yeah. And then a question around the hazard and risk register piece. A lot of it, I think we're trying to imagine things a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Because we're not doing the delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a somewhat resource constraining, and that verification piece as well. If we're not, I sort of wonder, are we? I think we're imagining, and it's where do we draw that line, because we're not doing the delivery of it as well. I'm not sure. So yeah.
Do you have access to, like during that design stage, access to that knowledge base of the end user who could sort of inform?
Yeah, definitely. Like we obviously work very close with the delivery partners and companies that do that. And we've got people that get involved a lot. It's just, just interesting to watch, because we're much more project management kind of position. But no.
And I can imagine too. So in a former life, I did a little stint with a they're a company in the UK that specialise in refitting out, so designing and refitting like banks and things like that.
Okay.
So we had, let's say, designers, so interior designers and all that sort of stuff on there. Their understanding of the risk impacts of their design, they had, no idea. And they had to go on a bit of a learning journey to start to think about, like, overlay that risk aspect into the things they're producing, just part of their day in, day out. That's what prompted in my head when I'm listening to what you're describing. And
yeah, and it's an interesting place to be when you're one step removed a little bit from the and like, you know, we talk about critical risks and the verification. Like, we don't own the assets, we don't own the equipment, we don't own the I've worked in other places in, like, you know, a manufacturing environment where it's a much more fixed constraint environment. It's a lot more, you know, those critical control verifications and assessments of plant and equipment makes so much more sense when it's fixed and it's repeatable and it's, but when it's so dynamic and you don't really know what the environment looks like or what equipment's going to be, it's like, is this our, they are our risks, but how do we manage them when we're not able to, or assess them so close at that granularity?
And is there a once, let's say, so you do the design bit and then it goes off in execution, and then people do some stuff and then you learn some more stuff. Is there an update of the original risk assessment based on what's being uncovered?
There should be, absolutely, definitely. There's you know, project reviews and you know, consultation the whole way through, and ideally the project managers would take that knowledge. But it's as far as centralization of that information, that's probably something I think we need to work on, as far as lessons learned repository or something, for sure. Yeah, but no, it's really it's interesting, and just trying to apply it into our environment as well. But no, thanks again for your time. I think what you do, it digests it. Like, I remember the first time I heard about bow ties, it was very overwhelming, but it makes a lot of sense to really deliver it, for sure. Yeah, no, thank you, mate. Thank you for taking the time to jump on. It's good, and it's good that it helped clarify some stuff for you. Anyway, that's good. Cheers, mate. Have a good day. All right, you too. Thanks, Mitchell. Bye-bye. Hey, lovely. If you can hear me, I'm going to jump off. Once the recording's done and recorded, can you do the top and tail of it so then we can get it out? Awesome. All right. Thanks, mate. All right, I'm going to jump off. Bye-bye.